Hey there, hello there. Jeff Cutter Diamond with yet another top 10, and tonight it's the top 10 most heartbreaking moments for Leaf fans like myself. Very hard. Number 10, November 2000. Never too late to lose. The Leafs had a 5-0 lead with 15 minutes left to play in the third period against St. Louis. Things were looking good. And St. Louis was the President's Trophy winner the year before. And with St. Louis's powerhouse, it happened. Alex Havanoff scored 2 third-period goals, plus Chris Pronger's big goal late in the final minute of the game made it 5-5. Blues went to overtime, and it was... Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the St. Louis player's name. It wasn't Havanoff, it was someone else. Ricard Person, no. But anyway, St. Louis scored in overtime and knocked the Leafs out 6-5. Leafs got a point, but St. Louis got the extra one. Number 9, Islanders clinch and forced the Leafs to go golfing. The final day of the NHL season was Sunday, April 8th, 2007. Of course, I know this off the top of my head, not just reading from the list, because that was the day before my 22nd birthday. I was still in college, by the way. The Leafs beat the Habs on Saturday night 6-5, knocking the Habs out of the playoffs and putting the Leafs in the 8th spot. The Islanders needed a win, by hook or by crook. Even if the Devils beat the Islanders in overtime or a shootout, that would not be enough. The Leafs would have won on regulation wins. So anyway, the Islanders were up by a goal. The Devils needed something. And thanks to a scramble and a John Madden goal with less than a second left in the third period, the Devils tied the game and went to overtime. Unfortunately, the Islanders won the shootout. And that actually sent the Leafs packing, thanks to Wayne Dubowitz. So the Islanders actually won their last 4 games of the season, even beating the Leafs in a famous game on Long Island to knock the Leafs out of the playoffs. And that's been the closest the Leafs have been to the playoffs in a full season. Of course, in 2013, they made the playoffs, but it was a strike-shortened season. Number 8, Doug Gilmour comes back to the Leafs. Or does he? So anyway, Doug Gilmour was one of the greatest Leafs of all time. 25 years ago, he came in that famous 10-player trade that sent Gary Leibman and Jeff Reese to Calgary for basically Jamie McCallum and Doug Gilmour. So anyway, Gilmour was captain for 3 years for the Leafs and got the Leafs to 2 conference finals, including that disgusting loss to the LA Kings in 1993 in the Stanley Cup playoffs, when the Leafs should have taken care of the Kings and gone to the Stanley Cup against Montreal. But anyway, Gilmour left the Leafs because the Leafs wanted to trade him to a contending team, which was New Jersey. New Jersey ended up getting their butts handed to them by the Rangers in the second round. But Gilmour came back. He played well for the Devils, Sabres, and Habs, and then the Habs traded him to the Leafs. Surprise, surprise. Gilmour was ready to go and help the Leafs do a playoff run. March 13th, Friday the 13th, should have seen this coming. Doug Gilmour came back, Leafs against the Flames, and I think TSN had that game. But unfortunately, Dave Lowry collided with him on Gilmour's second shift. Gilmour tore his ACL and retired a few months later, and the Leafs fans couldn't wait for his home return, which was pissing me off. So anyway, that was it. Number 7, 6 shots too little. After losing Game 5 of the conference semifinals against the Devils on home ice, the Leafs had to win in New Jersey. In New Jersey. Not easy. Unfortunately, the Leafs just had troubles. The youngsters couldn't do anything. The Leafs had their backs up against the wall. And they lost 3-0 to the Devils. Well, winning in New Jersey was one thing. Putting up 6 shots on goal in 3 periods was another. 3 in the first, 2 in the second, 1 in the third. The Leafs have the least amount of shots in a NHL game in history in the modern era. Jesus Christ. Number 6, the 1987 playoffs. What might have been. The Leafs were rebuilding after the Darryl Sittler and Lenny McDonald debacle, with Harold Ballard still behind the Leafs, and Punch and Lack fortunately retiring after a heart attack. The Leafs had a great identity. They drafted Wendell Clark first overall. They picked up Rick 5 and Steve Thomas through a couple of trades. And that led them to the 87 playoffs. The Leafs were really massive underdogs. But thanks to their feistiness, they took care of the St. Louis Blues in 6 games to face Detroit in round 2. Detroit, the division winners, and the odds-on favorite to go to the conference finals against Edmonton, were there. But the Leafs shocked everyone by beating Detroit in games 1 and 2 on their ice and outscoring them by a combined score of 11-4. Leafs lost game 3, but thanks to a Mike Allison overtime goal against Detroit, the Leafs were up 3-1 and were 1 win away from maybe putting the Leafs in the Final Four for the first time in God knows how in 8 years. Unfortunately, it was just terrible. 8 years, sorry, I made 9. It was all terrible. The Leafs would end up losing 3 straight games, scoring only twice on Glenn Hanlon, and Hanlon had 2 shutouts in games 5 and 7. Make sure the Leafs collapsed and put the Red Wings into the conference finals. Of course, Edmonton beat the tar out of them, but it could have been Toronto. Number 5, Jeremy Roenick strikes again. Just 1 year after the 2003 debacle in Game 7 in Philadelphia, the Leafs were facing the Flyers once again. After knocking out the Senators in the first round in 7 hard-earned games thanks to Joe Nundyke's 2 goals on a terrible Patrick Moline. There were a lot of Leafs mistakes. 2004, the Leafs had a good chance to make a playoff push. They had contracts for Gary Roberts, Joe Nundyke, Alex Mogilny to negotiate, and of course they got Brian Leetch. Leafs were down 3-2. Game 6 on home ice. The Leafs were down 2-1. Matt Sundin saves the day, sent the game to overtime. And in that overtime, Sammy Kapanen got a nasty hit from Darcy Tucker. And thankfully for Philadelphia, he actually ended up crawling to the bench, not stopping play. And that kept play going. And a few minutes later, Jeremy Roenick on a 2-1 with John LeClair kept it and shot and scored 8 minutes into overtime. Beat at Belfort, and the Leafs were out of the playoffs. Philly would then go on to get beaten by Tampa in 7 games themselves. But anyway, the Leafs couldn't make the playoffs till 2013. Number 4, Maple Leafs great chance in 99 destroyed. The 99 playoffs had Leafs Nation in a frenzy. The Leafs took care of the Flyers in 6 games, much to Dad Snyder's chagrin. Took care of Pittsburgh with a couple of big overtime goals, one by Sergei Veras and one by Gary Falk. And the Leafs, all they had to do was beat their Niagara neighbors, the Buffalo Sabres, to go to the Stanley Cup final against either Dallas or Colorado. Leafs figured they had something going with Buffalo. All Buffalo's known for is Mike Peca and Dominik Hasek. The Sabres were actually the 7th seed, 6 points behind the Leafs, and the Leafs would have home ice advantage for the playoff series. The Leafs looked good. Unfortunately, strange as it sounds, the Leafs didn't face Dominik Hasek in Game 1 of that series. That was Dwayne Willison, and in front of a Sunday afternoon Fox crowd. I don't know why they didn't have the game Saturday night. But anyway, Dwayne Willison played their great doing this, and he helped Buffalo take care of the Leafs in 5 games. Hasek did come back, and of course that was the year Maple Leaf Gardens closed down. But the article I got this from says May 31st was the last game at Maple Leaf Gardens. Incorrect. That was February 1999 against Chicago. But anyway, the Sabres beat the Leafs. Leafs humbly lost. Number 3, Hurricane Heartbreak, 2002. The Leafs were 3 years later, they went back to a playoff run. They had to struggle against the Cupcakes, aka the New York Islanders, and beat them in 7 games. Then Ottawa came calling, and the Leafs nearly choked them, but the Leafs ended up winning Game 6 and 7 to win the series. They would face the Carolina Hurricanes, who, although they didn't get a lot of points, actually were the better seed because Carolina won the division, whereas the Leafs didn't. So anyway, the Leafs ended up in a back-and-forth game. They beat Carolina in Carolina 1-0 to force Game 6 on home ice, trying to force a Game 7 back in Raleigh. The Leafs had troubles in the third period. Matt Sundin, with 21 seconds left, scores to make it 1-1, and what a game it was. Overtime Heroics for the Leafs? No. Martin Gelinas, who would be famous for his overtime heroics in 2004 for the Calgary Flames, would actually be the hero for Carolina. He beats Cujo in overtime, and the Leafs again fall flat in the Final Four. Detroit beat up on Carolina in 5 games, but who knows? Leafs and Red Wings. Number 2, Bedlam in Meantown, May 2013. Now, personal note. This was the day before I was ready for orientation to Target Canada, and I was hoping I would celebrate with Leaf fans. So anyway, the Leafs had no chance in this series. I picked the Bruins to take care of Toronto because I know that Toronto stunk against Boston, all that. And I remember that Boston took a 3-1 series lead. Patrice Bergeron, I think, scored in overtime in Game 4, and that was huge. But however, the Leafs won 2-1 in Game 5 and 6 thanks to James Reimer's Optimus Rhymes thing. And the Leafs could win in Game 7. Ironically enough, my other team, the New York Rangers, were playing Game 7 against Washington and blew them out of the water. And that would have meant if the Leafs won against Boston, they would have faced New York in the second round. The Leafs were up 2-1. They put 2 more in. It's 4-1. And it's like, oh my God, they're going to win the game. No, 10 minutes left. Boston put up 3 goals, including 2 in the final minute, 22 seconds. Forced overtime, and Patrice Bergeron was the overtime hero. Won a Game 7 comeback. Boston would then take down New York and Pittsburgh on the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, whereas Toronto got beaten badly. And number 1, what else? The Kerry Fraser missed call. The Leafs had a great chance. Game 5, Glenn Anderson scores a famous overtime goal in Toronto. And all of a sudden, the Leafs were 1 win away from the Stanley Cup Finals. All they had to do was win in Los Angeles. And thanks to Wendell Clark's hat trick, the Leafs made it 4-4 and got in overtime. And in overtime, they were on the penalty kill. As Doug Gilmour tried to block a shot, Wayne Gretzky got a stick up, smacked Gilmour in the face. But Kerry Fraser didn't call anything, not even a 2-minute penalty. Some say Gretzky should have got 5 in a game, but a 2-minute penalty would have been just as effective. So anyway, no penalty was called. A few plays later, Gretzky ended up getting the pass from, I think it was Robitaille, and forced Game 7 in Toronto, which they choked away thanks to Gretzky's hat trick. The Leafs were so close. It was just terrible. It broke my heart. Anyway, that's all I've got for this top 10. So there'll be more coming up in the days ahead.